Hi there, it's Jeanette. Thanks for joining me today. I have a new video for Whimsy Stamps, and it features some of their newer products that have been recently released. I used a clear stamp set, which is called an Unbreakable Bond, and that is the image and sentiment that you see there. And I also used some vellum and their cloud and grass edger die set to create the background. For the colored part of the background, I used Distress ink, and what I did was I took the little mat that comes with the glass media mat, and I'm sort of squishing on some ink. I have Mermaid Lagoon, Squeezed Lemonade, Mowed Lawn, and then I took my Distress sprayer and really spritzed them with water. You can see all the water droplets sort of pooling up. And then I took the packaging, so this is what the stamp set was packaged in, and I pressed it onto the ink. So I pressed it onto the blue and yellow part first, and then I'm just transferring that onto my paper. This is Bristol Strathmore paper. And then I sort of picked up the aqua and the green, and I'm sort of moving down the card, squishing the ink on. It is totally random, totally messy, but it's kind of fun. If there were any areas that were too blank, I would just go in and pick up the color I needed and just sort of dab it on. Then I cleared off that whole mat with a paper towel and then spritzed it with water, and then I took that panel and put it face down into the water and just sort of moved it around in a circular motion, and you can see what a beautiful sort of soft background that creates. So I let some of the ink pool down onto the bottom, and the cardstock did curl up, but I left it aside while I did my coloration. And by the time I was finished, it had dried and it wasn't curled up anymore. I'm using that same paper, the Strathmore Bristol paper, to stamp the image, and I'm using archival black ink. Press firmly to get a nice clear impression. And these are the colors of Zig markers that I used to watercolor the image. So you have them there in one place, and then they will scroll along the screen as I use them. Starting off with my darker color, which is the beige, adding that to where the shadowed areas are going to be, then picking up the flesh color and sort of blending that out. There isn't a whole lot of area here, so it's really nice that these markers have a very nice fine tip. For the cheeks, I just sort of swirled it around on the mat, the color, and then picked it up from the mat with my paintbrush. This way you get a very soft cheek color and you don't get that sort of clown circle look. Then I just moved on to the legs using those first two colors. Same thing, dark color goes first, blend with the lighter color, and then if you need to lighten it up or you need to complete the blend a bit more, just do it with your paintbrush. For her hair, I did start off with oatmeal and yellow, and once that was sort of all finished being blended, I felt it was too light. It didn't sort of stand out at all, so I did go back in with dark oatmeal. And once I put that in, I just sort of added it to the sort of shadowed points of her hair. Once I did that and blended it with the water, I really liked it a lot better. So with Zig markers, you can actually, you can correct those mistakes. I was able to go in with another marker color and then fix the color to be what I wanted it to be. Now you can't see it, but I do have a little glass of water that's on the side, so I'm dipping my paintbrush in that to clean it off in between colors, and I have a paper towel there as well. So I'm dabbing off the excess water with the paper towel. For her dress, I wanted her to have a very soft looking dress, so I'm using light Carmine, then blending that out with Tea Rose, which is quite light. And then once I really liked how that was all blended out, I took my paintbrush and I blended it out with the water, and it gave a very sort of soft, it looks like her dress is made of like very light material, and that's really the look I was going for. Just make sure that you don't have any dark streaks or excess water, or you will get harsh lines when it dries. So always make sure your paintbrush is not excessively wet. Keep that paper towel on the side, and that really helps. I use the same two colors for her headband. And then I did need to add a little bit of color to her collar, so I used some light gray. Put that on her shoes as well. And then I need to darken those shoes up a little bit, so I added some dark gray, or just gray actually. Just blend everything out. And when I blended it, I added too much water and I removed too much color, so I went back in with the marker. For the dog, I'm just using two colors. The brown Zig marker, I find it actually pulls quite red, so I thought it would be really nice on the dog. It would sort of be a different brown from her hair. And then I did blend that with the dark oatmeal. And then to complete the blend, I just used some water. And I'll do this over every portion of the dog. So I like to work in small portions when I'm coloring. So when I'm coloring with Copic markers, I use them in small areas at a time. And it's the same thing with the Zig markers. I don't like to do the entire image at the same time, because I find that when I get back to where I started, the ink sometimes will have dried and it's really hard to like move it around and blend it. So I feel that by working in small areas, you're controlling what you're doing. The ink is still wet, so you're able to blend it much easier and get exactly the look you want. And they do blend beautifully together, these markers. You can use them together, blend over top each other, and it hasn't ruined the tip of my markers at all. And that's the way I've been coloring with them for like a couple of years. So I really like how this sort of looks. And these markers paired with this paper are really excellent. So finally going to work now on the dog's head. Again, that darker color going on, blending it out with the lighter color, and then the final blend is with your paintbrush and some water. If you find you have too much color on your paintbrush, you can always wipe it off on the paper towel as well. That helps you control everything. I did go back in with a little bit more dark gray just to sort of make her shoes stand out a little bit more. Blend that out. Then I'm going to work on the collar, and I just really had to just color in the collar just with one marker. That's all I needed. And then a little bit of yellow for his tag. I'm going to cut it all out now using a nice sharp pair of scissors. And make sure to cut very close to the image, but don't cut off that sort of black edged line, because it doesn't look as nice if you do that. Once I had the image colored and cut out, I realized it was just too small for this, the card base or the background I had created. So I trimmed that down, and I didn't pay attention, but I believe sort of the width I trimmed it to was 3.5. So then I trimmed my vellum to have the same width, so that it's going to go across the card nicely. And I'm going to use my Big Shot here to die cut the clouds. So I'm using the, at first I thought I was going to use the plain one, but then I decided to use the stitched cloud and the grass that sort of goes just the hill. So it's just a nice little mound. So I die cut those out. And you can see it's pretty subtle, but when you lay one on top of the other, you do get a little bit of a difference. So I'm just going to trim off the bottom of the clouds because I don't want that jagged edge. And now I can put it onto the background. Now it's very subtle. It doesn't, stand out, but it is enough, I think, for this card. I like how it turned out. I took some Nuvo glue and I just dotted the edges of the vellum, just tiny little dots right around the periphery of the vellum, and then when I put it onto the card, I made sure to sort of shift it around a little bit and then press it down. This sort of makes the glue sort of move out from being in the dots. And when it dried, you couldn't see it. I was really happy because I'm always finding it challenging to glue down my vellum or get my vellum adhered to my cards. Once that was done, I was able to use the same glue with the image. Again, I'm dotting the glue. I'm using bigger dots now for this though. I'm going to position it where I want it to be, and then I did put a large mounting block on top of that until it dried. Once it was all dried, I popped it back onto my MISTI. I chose the sentiment I wanted to use and just adjusted that. It was a little bit crooked. And then I used the same archival black ink to ink up the sentiment, and I re-inked it a couple of times, or maybe 3 times, just so that I would get a nice dark impression. And the MISTI is just perfect for being able to do this. I'm going to scatter some enamel dots. These are from Whimsy. They're not brand new. They've had them for a couple of years, but I think they're very beautiful because although they are smooth on the top, they have like glitter embedded in them. So they just have a little bit of shine and shimmer. And I just scattered it in the areas that I felt were a little too blank. And then tried to stop before I did too many. Sometimes I add too much to my cards. So once that was done, I took the card base that I had cut out, and I'm just going to score it down the middle. And just use my bone folder to make a nice crisp crease line. And I'm going to adhere this part or this panel with some foam adhesive. It's just going to make the panel sit off the front of the card, and it just gives it a little bit more interest. And this foam tape is not that thick, so I mean it's not going to prevent me from mailing this in a regular envelope. So I just had to peel off all that release paper and get it onto the card base. And I felt that the card base was still a little too big. So after I put the little white dots here, which again are pretty subtle, but they add a little something to the top of your card. Once I was finished using this white pen to make the dots, I did take the card and trim it slightly, just a little bit, just to make sure that the panel didn't look lost in that card. So once that was done, my card was all finished. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this inspires you to try something new the next time you create a card. A full list of supplies and links can be found below this video on YouTube, or you can check out my blog for more pictures and more information. Thanks for watching.